Conquering Manhood, Session 004.
Conquering Manhood. Command your legacy. Take action. And conquer all.
Welcome to the Conquering Manhood podcast. I'm your host, Jose Florencio, and each week we talk to an inspiring conqueror, a mastermind session to aid us on our journey of conquering all, every facet of our lives: health, wealth, relationship, lifestyle. Today's featured conqueror will teach us to think like a seal and take charge of our destiny at work, at home, and at life through mental toughness, emotional resilience, and uncanny intuition. Learn how to cultivate an offensive mindset to command your legacy and conquer all. Enjoy this conversation with our featured conqueror in session 004. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Trenley Butler. If you're like me, you want to dress in the latest style, but sometimes you don't have a clue where to begin. Well, Trenley Butler is here to assign you a butler assistant. Check them out at trenleybutler.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome back, Conqueror Nation, and thank you for joining us today. Our next featured conqueror is a living example of a true Renaissance man. From corporate man, consultant, and CPA to elite warrior by Trident as a Navy SEAL officer, #1 grad from his SEAL Buds Class 170 to retiring as a Navy SEAL commander after 20 years of service, co-founder of Coronado Brew Company, one of my favorite places, and founder of NavySeals.com, accomplished martial artist in black belt, Seido Karate, and even a New York Times bestselling author. Conqueror Nation, I'm excited to present to you the one and only Mark Devine. Mark, thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Hey, thanks, Jose. It's a pleasure to be here.
I just want to publicly thank you, man, as a fan and as a man for your past and present service, brother.
I appreciate that. Yeah, hoo-yah.
Hoo-yah. All right. In the Marine Corps, we say oorah, so I'll give you one of those.
I know. Thanks.
So, Mark, here at Conquer Manhood, we love to start things off with a success quote or a mantra that you personally applied in your life that's helped you guide you to the point where you're at today. Can you tell us that quote and then how you applied in your life?
I'll first give you a quote, and then I'll give you my mantra. One of my favorite quotes is Napoleon Hill: "What the mind of man can conceive, it can achieve." And, essentially that speaks so closely to, what I try to teach and unveil mind is that, we set up the conditions for winning in our mind, and learning how to do that is really critical for all of us. And then my mantra, this is a mantra that I somehow, it came to me at Buds, or I don't know where. I wish I could remember the precise moment it popped into my head. But it's literally, Jose, every time I start training, or it's even there when I wake up in the morning, and that is, I'm feeling good, looking good, I ought to be in Hollywood. And now, obviously, it has meaning to me, because when I say it, I start to feel good, and I start to look good. So, it's working. And really, it's just a form of positivity, right? It's a way to keep my mind and my emotional state tuned positively. So I'm always feeding, the courage wolf, so to speak.
I love that. And so you definitely look like you ought to be in Hollywood. They should call you Pretty Mark.
Well, it's funny you say that. After all these years of saying feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood, I finally had a bunch of Hollywood companies come and say they wanted to do something with SealFit. And we got, into these discussions over the last few years, and every time we got kind of down the road, and this is like investing a lot of time, my own time as well, it just didn't feel right. And so I finally made a decision just a few months ago to produce our own show. I'm going to invest in it, my own money, and we're going to produce our own SealFit show where we can show kind of what we do with our training and the type of impact it's having and the breakthroughs people have through the training, and also be able to do it in a way that completely honors the military and the SEALs and doesn't get mangled by some Hollywood bull.
So where can we see something as awesome as this show?
It'll be coming out on the Blaze Network this fall. So it's a little premature, but since I was since we kind of started out with that mantra, I thought it'd be interesting. It's kind of exciting to me because, Blaze Network is in 80 million freaking homes. I mean, it's amazing how many homes it's in, and we will be able to just expose a lot more people to our training. And my hope is that if we do a good job and it's successful, if we follow our own principles, it should be, then we'll be able to get it into a different network next year, like Discovery or Nat Geo or something like that, so that it'll be more mainstream.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited, and I will definitely be viewing.
Cool.
All right, Mark. So we brought you on because you're a true conqueror in my mind, right? And in addition to all the great things that I've mentioned about you already, you're also a renowned author. I mean, you've written like 3 books in a little over a year. That's correct, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that just blow
I
away.
just finished my 4th one, and I'm working on the 5th. And I got plans for a few more after that.
Overachiever, man. You're awesome. And so that's what I'm excited to get into today. So they're all important, but I want to squeeze as much of you as I can, So today in this conversation, I'd love to bridge Unbeatable Mind and the Way of the SEAL in today's conversation, because obviously in my mind, you brought those out by design, back to back like that. And so before we do that, Mark, though, we'd love to know a little bit about your personal life and Mark Divine, the man you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, actually, in a small town, about 500 people. It's called Barneville, New York. My early years were, kind of defined by that experience of living in rural upstate New York, being exposed to the Adirondack Mountains. It's a beautiful place in upstate New York. I don't know how many of your listeners appreciate that we have a 6 million acre protected wilderness in upstate New York with over 5,000 fresh lakes and these beautiful mountains. And that used to be my playground. We used to just run and hike and all play in the lakes, and just awesome. So I was very much of an outdoorsy guy, and really into endurance just through that experience. And that led me into endurance training in high school as a competitive swimmer primarily, and I lettered in 12 different times, but it was mostly the swimming that occupied my time and energy. And then I got recruited to swim at Colgate University, which is pretty close to my hometown. It's about only 45 minutes away. Colgate was a great formative experience for me. It's a terrific school. Very academically focused, but also, with a good balance of athletics. And, we had a fraternity. I was in a fraternity there. And so that was cool. And so I swam competitively there. And then I got into rowing, another arduous kind of endurance sport. And then from Colgate, I kind of followed some of my peers collectively went down to Manhattan, participated in a program with Big 8 accounting and consulting industry where they sent us collectively, kind of a few of these firms participated, and they hired from all the Ivy and lower Ivy League schools, and they sent us to New York University to get our MBAs, and they essentially said, okay, we'll teach you what you need to do to be an auditor. You get your MBA, and then you'll sit for the CPA exam. You become a CPA, and then over time you'll become a partner, and you'll be a more well-rounded partner because you come out of a liberal arts school as opposed to an accounting school. And it was a neat idea. Most of us got our MBAs and CPAs and then blasted off. And that's kind of what I did. I just blasted off into the SEAL teams. And I tell that story, Jose, in my book, The Way of the SEAL, kind of how that happened and why. And, what led me there. Primarily my martial arts training and beginning a process of meditation, kind of opened me up and led me there. And so then I went through SEAL training in 1990 at 25 years old, and graduated as honor man in my class. Some of the skills I had learned as a martial artist really were very, very helpful, and I was privileged to have a real enlightened master, I would say, as my martial arts teacher. And that combined with all the endurance training and all the time alone in the Adirondacks really just translated beautifully to that type of, solitary journey through buds where I just had to show up every day with my head on the screw down right and be really positive and really focused and really attentive to my teammates and really attentive to my own body and mind and just, watch every moment, so to speak. And so that allowed me to not sail through, but, obviously a lot of hard work, but I ended up graduating as honor man or number 1 graduate in my class. We had 185 people start and 19 of us finish.
Wow.
And so that was pretty cool to do that. And then, I served for 9 years in active duty, all around the world. It's just an amazing experience. very, very cool, career, extremely arduous career. And then I had gotten married to a Coronado girl named Sandy, and she was challenged by the lifestyle, where I was gone for 200 and some odd days a year. And so she asked me, if I would consider getting out of the Navy and just focusing on the family and having a family. And I honored that. And so I left the Navy and stayed in the reserves. And so that's why I ended up retiring as a commander, but half of my career was reserve officer. And that's what allowed me to get back into the business world. And you referenced Coronado Brewing Company. That was my first business. And I sold that business to my brothers-in-law. It was bittersweet, but a very successful venture nonetheless. And then I launched NavySeals.com and then SealFit, or actually US Tactical and then SealFit. So it turned out that business was in my blood after all, and I became an entrepreneur. And I realized that Navy SEALs were really entrepreneurial, and so the entrepreneurialness of the SEALs and that kind of take no prisoners winning mindset of the SEALs combined with my earlier career as a CPA and MBA really worked well together to help me succeed in business and keep learning every day. It's always a challenge, but being in business is a great grounds for both personal growth and professional, rewarding career, as you're aware yourself.
A few things in there that I want to mention and just highlight is it's pretty awesome that you were a suit man and a businessman, and then you jump into be a SEAL. Right. Complete opposite sides of the world, but it's amazing. Also, then your wife, who our spouses are the unsung heroes, who are really serving this nation by giving themselves to this country and giving their loved ones as well.
Everyone has a different challenge, right? When they marry a military guy or girl, vice versa, and so there's a point where it's got to go both ways, right?
Yeah.
And so in this case, I decided that my wife, for our marriage to succeed, I needed to kind of swing her direction and kind of meet her halfway by being a reserve officer as opposed to, and even that I was mobilized a couple times and gone to Iraq. And so there were challenges there, of course. But as an officer, for me, that worked out well because, I really did want I wanted the relationship to work and I wanted to have a family. And I knew it wouldn't work if I had, gone on to DevGru and, followed that whole path that was kind of being set up for me.
And the reserves, they got a sweet deal anyways. It's like a lot of undercover sweet deal.
It really is. It's like a hidden secret.
Yeah.
It's like a staffing service for elite warriors. The SEAL, there's like a couple hundred of us officers and, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you got going on right now? And, and they'll say, well, we could use you in Afghanistan for 90 days. And you're like, I'm in. And you'll be on a plane literally a week or two later. It's pretty cool.
I'll bring it into with my wife, for instance, who, when we got married, we had a child immediately, and I had to go to Afghanistan the whole time while she was pregnant. And luckily, they let me come back home within a month of my child being born. But
really?
So, there's women and any spouse, for that matter, that give their spouses out to this nation, a big congratulations to them.
No kidding.
So, Mark, you mentioned it, and you said it that the SEALs have an entrepreneurial heart to them, and that's exactly what I want to talk about because, I understand firsthand. I'm not a SEAL, I've never been a SEAL, but I understand the grit and the work that you guys do and how important it is and the difficulty of the missions you guys provide. Mm-hmm. But I also find that very interesting that SEALs can a lot of times move forward beyond the gun club and allow them become entrepreneurs, more so compared to our other branches of services.
Yeah. Why
do you think that is? What's the correlation there?
I think there's two things at play. One is the type of people who are attracted to the SEALs, right? It's a unique kind of breed that really wants to go do the most dangerous missions in the most challenging environments, right? With a small team, often in teams of two or on occasion, you're alone out there, even though you've got a team at your back providing top cover. So that's kind of unique. And so the guys who go into the SEALs tend to be, very athletic, very fit, but also mentally independent, right? They really bristle at they bristle at the traditional military control, top-down authoritative leadership. Now, we have to deal with that in garrison and in certain settings, but the SEAL teams are smart to protect the SEAL operators typically from the worst of that. Probably you experience, far worse bureaucracy and rigid rules than the SEALs do, because, we like to operate in small units, teams of 4, 8, or 12. Sometimes even, like I said, a swim pair. And we tend to push leadership down, push decision-making down. Now, sometimes, obviously, it slides back up, especially during peacetime, but we like to push it down. And so oftentimes you'll have a petty officer first class, which is an E5, who's doing the job of let's say, a Marine Corps major, even a captain or a major. Mm-hmm. And, we'll often even battlefield pin people just so that they get the respect, because they'll walk in the room and they'll be able to command respect with the trident, but a lot of people will look at the rank and say, well, this guy's only an E5. What the hell does he know? And the reality is he's making the decisions, and he's the one that's in contact with, all the higher ups on the other side, because they trust him. And it's amazing what some of these young SEALs can accomplish, because they're very smart and independent thinking and problem solvers, and willing to go and go places and to think things that other people aren't, who are conditioned to be more by the book, so to speak. So that is important. So both the type of person and then the way the SEALs self-organize, so that we can allow for that kind of, ingenuity and innovation and adaptation to occur. And then, just the basic principles of the SEALs, even encoded into their ethos, is that, we're ready to lead and ready to follow. Right, and we'll never quit. Well, those are some darn good skills for an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. Be a leader, be ready to lead, but also be ready to step out of the way when another expert or someone with a better answer comes along. Get your ego out of the way, check it at the door, and don't ever quit. Because the business that you launch right now is not going to be the business that you're making money with in a year or even 2 years from now. You've got to be able to innovate and adapt. You've got to move with some speed and dexterity. And you got to be able to make decisions with incomplete information, severely incomplete information. And you realize that doubt is eliminated through action, and so you're an action taker. And all these things that the SEALs learn, to accomplish their mission in the field tend to dovetail very well with being an entrepreneur.
I could totally see that. As an entrepreneur, you are on the trail and you're figuring it out as you go about.
Yeah, you fail forward fast. That's what we say.
Yeah, that's good. All right, Mark. So I want to get into your book now, The Way of the SEAL. And to me, it obviously culminates your life from martial arts to entrepreneurship, and obviously then your work in the SEALs. But if we could start with establishing your set point, what does that mean to you, and why is it important that we start there?
Yeah. Now, first, I think first it's important to say that the book really is the way of the SEAL, not the way of the SEALs. A lot of the principles are drawn, from the SEALs, but I would say, as you alluded, there's an equal number that are drawn from warrior traditions, such as my martial arts traditions and even yoga, and then just basic life lessons that I've learned. So it's not like a leadership secrets of the SEALs book. It's much more about how to orient yourself toward mastery so that you can serve well, whether that be your family, team, or society at large, right? And so in order to do that, the first principle is you have to understand where you are right now. It's just like, I tell this story when I was going through SEAL qualification training. We parachuted into Fort Lewis up in Washington State. It's like some of the thickest woods you could ever imagine. And right there from the drop zone, right, we were meant to establish a set point, and then from there navigate our way to our first rally point. And this is back in map and compass days, so we didn't have a GPS where you could just push a button to get your set point, which is basically the grid or the the coordinates where you are right now. And so we just kind of had to find it on the map and place an X there. And then, draw an arrow to your rendezvous point and figure out, what bearing you're going to walk. And that is it's such a great metaphor for life, right? If you have a place that you want to go, you have an audacious goal, right? To build a business, build a family, accomplish some audacious mission. it really helps to know where you are right now. What point are you pushing off from in order to get there, right? Without a good set point, without knowing where you are, it's very difficult to know or to, draw a straight line, so to speak, to where you want to go. And so that whole principle really is about getting to know yourself as you are right here and right now. And it includes a series of questions and what I call developing your personal ethos and your stand, right? Your stand is basically, where do you stand right now? What principles do you believe so strongly in that you're willing to stand your ground on? Even no matter how heavy the winds get, of resistance. And then your personal ethos is essentially a notion of why you're doing what you're doing. What's your overarching purpose in this life, right? And what is it that you're going to do that you can be passionate about to fulfill that purpose? And then what principles are going to guide you along the way, right? And so I call those the 3 Ps. So the 3 Ps in your stand represent your personal ethos, and that helps you understand kind of where you are today so that you have a good understanding, a good self-awareness. You can be guided along the way by keeping, constantly checking in with this ethos and making sure that you're on track, so to speak.
And you're absolutely right. Once you know where destination B is at and you're starting at A, it's just, it gives you a sense of clarity. It gives you a path to go on. And that's, half the battle there.
Right. Well, and so often people will launch toward the destination without a good self-assessment of where they are. I see that all the time with SEAL candidates who come through SEAL Fit. Like, I want to be a Navy SEAL, Okay, great. Maybe they knew someone from their high school or, someone in their town, or maybe they just saw Lone Survivor, right? And just, they got inspired. And so next thing you know, at least they're wise enough to come to my training, but they're like completely and utterly unprepared. And yet they've got a meeting with the recruiter like the following month.
Yeah.
And, so we have to sit them down and say, listen, here's the deal. Or your set point is way off, right? We assess you to be at least 2 years out in your training. I mean, you've got that much work to do if you want to stand a reasonable chance of success. If you want to go in there with a win before you even start, then you need to do these things, and it's going to take you 2 years. And I would say maybe half of the folks who we have to say that to will listen to us, and the other half are, already hell bent and or too codependent to tell the recruiter, that we told them that they weren't ready, or that they aren't ready, and they end up in the fleet because they don't make it through the training.
To have a program like the SEAL Fit, back in my days, I used to be a drill instructor as well.
Did you?
Over at Paris Island. And to get the quality of civilians
right.
that would go through there, it was like, my goodness, what is going on with society? Why are we so weak?
Yes.
And
interesting, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so establishing the set point, what I find so interesting, Mark, is that you were able to do that at such an early age. Because for me, and I don't know why, and maybe you have the answer to that, is I wasn't able to make those types of decisions and those types of game-changing moves in my mind and, in my personal being to say, hey, these are my core values. This is where I stand. This is what I want in the future. How were you able to do that at such an early age?
Most people have trouble with that, Jose. Yeah, and I think the answer to that is pretty simple, but it's profound. I was common in that my life was defined, my inner life was defined by the mental framework that my family, kind of established for me, and my social structure, and a lot of different things. Upstate New York, American, growing up in the 60s and 70s, 80s, dialogue in my family, my language, those types of things. So that I would say that sets up your mental framework, which is comprised of your internal dialogue, your emotions, and your imagery. And those then are experienced as beliefs, and then patterns of behavior, patterns of thought, patterns of feeling. So at any rate, all those patterns led me, through high school into college, led me to be an econ major at college, and then to get a job in the business world, because my family was a business family. We have a business that had been around for over 100 years. It was expected kind of that we would come back to this family business, And, all of this was just, it made sense for me then to go from college into business school and, become a public accountant. And everyone thought that was an excellent, excellent career choice for me and great experience for me to then either go back to the family business or go into trading or, something. Anyways, all that's a backdrop for saying that when I started training in my martial art, my first martial art, and I alluded to earlier that I had an enlightened master who really understood the science of mental development, and he had us sit down on a bench and practice concentration training. And then in those moments of stillness, after 45 minutes of concentration and meditation, then we would have a little dialogue, right? Like a koan lecture, life lessons. Couple years of this, and my mental patterns started to change. My notion of who I was, my notion of what reality was meant to be like, and the types of decisions I just started to make some different decisions. And furthermore, practicing the meditation and concentration, once my mind was able to concentrate more and I was able to kind of let go of structured thought and just be present, what happened is it allowed, wisdom, I think, or insights to kind of finally be exposed. Probably there all the time, but my mind was so busy, latched onto all these other thoughts and ideas and beliefs and patterns that, they were completely, trammeled, right? Just shoved off to the wayside. And so, but sitting in silence and practicing sitting in silence, and this is not a simple or quick process, but it took me a few years, all of a sudden I'm starting to get these insights and these notions that just well up and that I know to be true about myself. And certainly one of them was that I was misaligned and I was in a career that was not right for me, and that I wasn't inspired by the money, and I wasn't inspired by the titles, and I wasn't inspired to, be in a suit every day. And so when it first started out as kind of like this is what is not right with my life. Like I didn't like what I experienced. I didn't like who I was becoming. I didn't like the work I was doing. And so that kind of negative interrogatory, right, opened up the opportunity to ask better questions. It's interesting, I've since said that the quality of your life will depend on the quality of the questions you ask. And so I started to ask better questions. And those questions included, like, if not that, what then? What am I meant to be doing? And of course, that led to another question is, what am I here for on this planet? What is my purpose? Right? And so now you see how I'm kind of leading myself into developing my first set point, because I was so uncomfortable with this notion that I was living this patterned life that was not right for me, that I started to ask better questions. And those questions led me to discover my ethos, discover, this notion that my purpose was to be a warrior and a leader and to serve, others and serve my country. And then I had to figure out, well, how am I going to do that? Well, then the question became, well, what am I really good at? What am I passionate about? What would I do right now, if money wasn't an option? And I thought, well, I love physical training, and I love adventure, and I love being outdoors, and I love leadership. And I thought, okay, well, where can I, if those things I'm passionate about and I love, where can I find that? And then, that's what kind of led me into the SEAL teams. I mean, it's a more labyrinthine process than that, but so that's kind of how it worked for me. And, it was such a profound experience. And of course, then the SEALs kind of, immediately I knew I was home. It was I was in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. That it kind of confirmed that process was really valuable. And it's one of the things I really help people work through with Unbeatable Mind, my online training program. And
so you became present in mind by disconnecting, and these moments of silence, all this came about and evolved within you through that silence.
Yeah, I call it cultivating sacred silence, right? There's a lot of ways to do it. I think I had the conditions for it established early in my life when I used to go out and spend hours alone hiking in the Adirondacks or hours swimming in the pool. And I was comfortable with that independence and being alone and managing my thoughts, right? Managing my internal thoughts and dialogues in those settings. And so when I realized that, hey, that was actually a valuable skill, right? It was when I was deliberately sitting on the Zen meditation bench and trying to quiet my mind, I would go back to some of those moments and imagine myself hiking on the trail when my mind is quiet, or swimming in a lake when my mind is quiet. And it would quiet my mind, right? And so there I am sitting, and instead of trying to think of something or trying to get through the workout or the hike, I would just sit, right, and try to be quiet, try to still my mind, my thinking mind, and try to find that kind of presence. And when I found it in those moments, and albeit they were kind of rare to begin with, right? This type of process, some people spend years and years trying to meditate, and they never experience the stillness that I'm talking about. But it's there for you if you really want to work at it, right? It's just a slow, deliberate process, a little bit of time every day. You don't have to do a lot, 5 to 10 minutes every day.
Can you give us a little practical for everybody listening?
Yeah, I'll give you the exact process that I used in the beginning, early in my training. And this came from, Master Nakamura, Kaicho Nakamura. And it was sit and just get connected with your breathing, right? And so you're going to be breathing in through your nose, deep in your belly. This is a calming breath. So it's going to start to calm your mind down, slow it down. And then what you're going to do is, after a few moments is just breath awareness. You're going to try to, essentially, every inhale and exhale, you're going to count. And you're not trying to think of anything else besides inhale and watching the breath come in, or noticing the breath come in. Exhale, noticing the breath go out, and then count 1. Right? And then inhale, exhale, count 2. Inhale, exhale, count 3. Now, the interesting thing is, you're not meant to be thinking, like no active thought. And what you'll notice is that even on the very first inhale, exhale, your mind is thinking. And so you basically stay at 0 until you can do this, you can get to 1 without a thought, and honest, and you have to learn to be honest with yourself as well. Because your mind is really kind of tricky that way. It's pretty wily. It's going to trick you. And another thing that will happen is you'll be like inhale, exhale, 1, 2, 3, and you'll keep counting, but you've been thinking about everything under the sun. And so when you notice that you've been thinking, then, without beating yourself up, just label it, I'm thinking, and then go back to 0. And so the idea is to try to count to 10. It's like a game. And again, if you're honest with yourself, you'll find that it takes months and months and months. It took me a good 9 months before I could get to like 5 or 6 without any like interfering thoughts. But it's extremely powerful training, because you really are just training your mind to concentrate on a very narrow range of things. Literally, there's 2 things you need to work on there: just the breath and the count. And so all those other thoughts that are racing through your mind are not welcome. And so you just basically, you're training your mind to come back under your control. I liken it to your mind being like a beautiful wild black stallion, but it's just completely out of control, and it can harm you, right? It can lead you down, into canyons and ravines that you don't want to go. It can, cause you to make decisions. It can throw you off and hurt you. Like, your mind untrained is like a wild stallion. But if you train that mind, if you train that stallion, wow, man, it can take you to places that you couldn't imagine, right? And it'll never tire in doing so, and it'll serve you diligently as an able partner, as a teammate throughout your life. And just learning how to tame and control the mind and turn it into an ally as opposed to a fiendish, enemy is a kind of this first step in this whole process. And that drill I just talked about is a good one to start with.
I like that. I also like how you illustrated it in The Way of the Seal. And I believe it was that you put your mind and you're underneath water, and as these ideas come about, you just watch them flow to the top. That really helped me out. Yeah,
that's I call that the still water runs deep visualization. What I loved about that is because if your mind has a visual image to hold on to, it's easier to control the thoughts. And so this is a kind of a trick. And so the still water runs deep is pretty powerful to get you to kind of accelerate, right, the process of learning to control your mind. And I developed this based upon a lecture that Nakamura gave after one of these meditation sessions. And he just talked about, we didn't do the visualization. I came up with that later on. But he talked about the still water that runs deep inside of us. And that, our minds, that monkey mind, that raging stallion mind, is like the choppy rapids of a river. But every once in a while, anyone who's rafted a river knows this, that you can come around a bend and all of a sudden, it gets deep and the water gets very still. And so wherever the water is deep, it's also still. And so that represents kind of the stillness of our inner mind, of our non-thinking mind, of our perceiving mind. And so the drill or the skill is to try to get out of the rapids and into the stillness where your character runs deep, or where your spirit runs deep.
I love it. This is I'm going to put it into practice. So what's next after we've established our set point? We bring in, I'm assuming, increasing our mental toughness and emotional resilience, right?
Well, I think, a lot of people get it backwards. At first they get their goal and then they establish a set point. I think it goes the other way. You establish your set point and you get to know yourself at a deep level, and then that's going to inform the goals that you have in life. Like for me, I didn't just immediately say, I want to be a Navy SEAL and then try to get to know myself and distill my mind. It really happened the other way around. And so the second step is what I call developing front sight focus. And this is really learning how to set the right targets in life and getting, clear about what those targets should be, what they can be based upon your skills, knowledge, training, etc., and to learn how to develop a process to really bulletproof those missions so that you can step forth into the execution phase with a tremendous amount of confidence and with the structure, the mental structure for the win. So I think that's really the second step. And then, as you alluded to, the third step is to stay the course by forging mental toughness and emotional resiliency. And that's something that we train also. Both of those I think can be trained. They need to be trained. It's easy to launch into something with all sorts of excitement. And then, as soon as the resistance starts, which it always will because no plan survives contact with the enemy, then, people will fall back or they'll change or they'll think, well, that wasn't the right goal, or they'll quit. And we don't ever quit, especially SEALs. We don't quit. We find a way or we make a way. And so you have to be mentally tough. And so we use certain skills to develop mental toughness, and we test ourselves, and we challenge ourselves, and we embrace the suck, and we develop, disciplines around mental toughness. And so that's covered in the book as well.
I think it's brilliant how you bring in together the front sight post, or what would you call it?
Front sight focus.
Front sight focus. Because, I'm a marksman myself. And so,
right.
When you're looking through the rear aperture and which is closest to you,
right,
it kind of relates to life. All these distractions that are in your face, and you have to look past that and look at the front sight post so that you can hit your target dead on.
That's right. And the other thing that's cool about that, Jose, is your target is out there. It's 25, 50, or if you're a sniper, it's 1,000 yards out there. And you line up on that target. You know what you're going after. And the target, and metaphorically, of course, we're talking about is your goal. Like if you want to launch a business, or what you become a Navy SEAL or a MARSOC guy, now called the Raiders, right? If you want to become a Raider, that's your target. It's way out there. But when you look through that front the aperture, you're focusing. Once you've got the target lined up, you're focusing only on that front sight. And so that metaphorically is related to your micro goal. Like what are you going to shoot at today that's going to get you closer to that target? And too many people, they focus on the big target and they forget, they don't really know what the little targets are. Life gets in the way of the important little targets that they should be shooting at today that are going to definitively move them closer and closer to that big target until essentially they've achieved it without even knowing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Wow. This is awesome. So can you give us an example of what it looks like to create mental toughness and emotional resilience?
Yeah, mental toughness is it's one of those things like some people think either you got it or you don't, right? And certainly the SEALs believe that, right? You show up at Buds and you could have two guys who each are, quarterback of their football teams and super smart. And one of them happens to have been brought up on a farm, let's say, and during his youth and throughout, he just had to like work really hard, and and do it with a positive attitude. And he just learned this internal dialogue that every day was going to be, filled with this challenge, but then he was going to get to enjoy the benefits of that training and benefits of working the land and whatever. Whereas the other guy, right, maybe just happened to be extremely talented athlete. Everything came easy to him, grew up in, the burbs, just went to high school and college and was, captain of his team and didn't have to do a whole lot of work besides the athletic training. And both of them get to SEAL training. And of course, the SEAL training, nobody cares whether you were, president of the United States or Olympic athlete or quarterback of your football team at Annapolis or West Point or whatever. It doesn't matter. You are like, for me, I was an MBA, CPA, black belt in karate, competitive swimmer. And there I was standing right next to the farm boy, and we both had to perform or we were both out.
At equals.
Exactly. We were equals, even the officers. It was awesome. Anyways, only those people who have the grit, right, to stay the course over the long haul, through all the ups and downs, through all the challenges that the instructors throw at you, which are largely physical and emotional and mental. I mean, only those who have that mental toughness are going to make it. And so, that's why like 19 people graduated out of my class of 180 or so. A lot of smart and very capable people dropped or got injured or quit. So then later on, when I started to teach Navy SEAL candidates, I was like, I started to look at what it was that made me and my other people who survived SEAL training or thrived in it. What was it? What were the attributes of mental toughness that allowed them to succeed at such a high level and cause the other people to fail because they didn't have it? And so we kind of came up, there's 4 big ones, and the SEALs also teach this now. One is, you got to be able to control your stress response. You got to be able to control your physiology so that the constant stress and anxiety of the training and the physical stress doesn't overwhelm you, right? And we do this by controlling our breath, right? So breath control, controlling our breath, slowing down our breath, learning to breathe through our nose, learning to slow down the number of breaths we take per minute has an amazing effect of really calming down our body and allowing us to stay kind of in control, so to speak. And then the second was this notion of taking, and I've already alluded to it a few times in this talk, taking control of your internal dialogue and structuring it so it leads you towards success. And so in order to be successful, you have to have very positive internal dialogue. And I have this saying in my Unbuild Mind book that negativity destroys performance. And so we got to feed positivity, feed courage, and we've got to starve fear, right? And we do this through our internal talk and also the mental models we use and the way we frame, our relationship to the problem and those types of things. So it really comes down to how do you think,
Yeah.
And you got to learn how to think well to make good decisions. And of course, then aligned with that closely is that we learn that the small decisions are the most important ones, right? How you get through each evolution, how you interact with your boat crew and the other teammates and the instructors. The magic is in the small moments and not the big ones, And again, that has, in order to find that magic, you have to be in control of your mind, and you have to, make sure that your dialogue is a winning dialogue, right? And this extends to both emotions and imagery as well, I might add. The third skill is to actually use your imagery to be able to get a picture of victory in your mind and to hold it there, right? And so, for me, I trained visually with visualization for a good year and a few months before I went to SEAL training. When I decided I was going to go and be a SEAL, notice I didn't say I wanted to be a SEAL, but when I decided to be a SEAL, I upped my physical training, but I also knew that I needed to up my mental training. And so I visualized myself succeeding at Buzz. I visualized myself as a SEAL, as a successful SEAL, after training. And I did that every single day for 20 minutes. And over time, this led to tremendous confidence because I was setting up the conditions mentally to know what it looked like, and then to add emotion to it, know what it feels like to actually win, to be a SEAL. And sports psychologists and great trainers and like Olympic level and now NFL players use this very similar process. So a lot of peeps in the sports performance world already know about this, and I think it's a skill that everybody can and should use, right? Everybody, for business or for your personal life. And the last one, last skill that really helps develop mental toughness is to set micro goals. This is kind of related to chunking things down, like I was saying, to making good decisions moment to moment, but it really is more of a practical thing. It's like, what exactly is your goal right now, and how is this micro goal going to get you closer to your next larger goal, and how's that goal tied to your ultimate goal, right? And so you have these strategic goals, and then you have these tactical goals, and they can get chunked down to the micro goals. And when then the going gets really tough, Jose, like if you're trying to navigate Hell Week, which is, a few hundred hours of nonstop training without any sleep, these goals become like literally moment to moment. And so it's a way to kind of train to be really present and to keep your mind out of a future or a past state, but, operating right here, right now. And in that present moment state, you have a lot of power. It's when you get out of that and you start obsessing or, being anxious about whether you can do something or how much time is left or how far you still have to run or swim. That's when you lose power and you lose strength and you start to feed the fear wolf.
And I couldn't help myself as you were speaking about all these goals and the steps to think about how much it related to even in your relationship with your spouse or something like that, just maintaining and feeding the positive thoughts. And then it's about those small day-to-day tasks, vice the big, I took my wife this way for anniversary or something like that. It's the day-to-day interaction and those small micro goals.
Yeah, absolutely. This works in any setting. I think, mentally tough couples really have very successful marriages. So you can apply these skills to develop mental toughness in your family and with your kids. And emotional resiliency kind of is an offshoot of mental toughness. Is really applying the skills to your emotional life will develop resiliency. But ultimately, resiliency is about being able to bounce back quickly when the inevitable challenges hit you in life. And in order to be emotionally resilient, you got to be very optimistic. Well, optimism comes from feeding the courage wolf, from being positive. And if you train yourself to be positive, and this is especially true if you grew up I grew up in a negative kind of environment. My family was negative. That's one of the reasons without really knowing it, I naturally my antidote to the negativity was to spend a lot of time alone in nature. And nature is never negative, right? Nature is always positive, always meets you where you're at.
Always.
Even when nature throws a storm at you or something like that, it's just it's neutral or positive, I think. At any rate, if you grew up in a negative family with negative dialogue and violence or abuse or anything like that, then it becomes especially an urgent need for you to learn how to get control of the inner dialogue and to cultivate positivity and optimism, because otherwise you'll never really be successful or happy to the level that you could be in life. Because again, that corrosive negativity just destroys peace of mind, destroys performance. But you can cultivate positivity and optimism. You can cultivate an abundant attitude. But you got to practice it. It's like anything else. This goes beyond listening to this podcast, goes beyond reading a book. It's something you just have to practice every day and make it an important, a critical skill, right, to develop in your life. And this, without that, and then the rest of the skills fall short because you're always sabotaging yourself.
It makes perfect sense. And it's about, like you said, the wolf you feed. But then you mentioned practicing maintaining that picture in your mind, right, as your final step. Can you share with us, Mark, a story where the importance of staying consistent in your training as you went through your life, but maybe even an individual like yourself where you didn't maintain that habitual practice?
Sure.
Can you share with us a story where you probably fell short?
Absolutely.
What that did to you?
For me, it was the transition. When I transitioned from active duty SEAL team back into the business world, the SEALs, let me back up and say, one of the things I teach is that we have to align and optimize what I call the three spheres. And the three spheres are your internal state, your internal sense of self, and this is what we've been talking about mostly on this podcast, your thoughts, your emotions, your dialogue, your internal structure. You set that up and you maintain that to win. But you also live in a shared community, right? And so when you're for a lot of us, the shared community is our family. It could be family of origin or our current family or both. And then our teams, our work teams, right?
Right.
Or our social teams or our church team or our training teams, right? And so that's when we get into those teams, it becomes more of a shared we space, and that we has energy beyond the individual I's. Like there's a morphogenic field that develops around teams, and that can either be excellent and powerful morphogenic field, or it can be one that can drag you down, right? And if anyone who's been on a shitty team knows what I'm talking about to be true. It brings you down to a lower level of feeling and thinking. Whereas an elite team, like in the SEAL teams, it can really bring you up and cause you to step up to a higher standard. So that's the we space. And then the it is the structures and the systems and the rules and the regulations. And so all families have systems and structures and rules, all businesses, all organizations. Well, in the SEAL teams, this is back to your question, Jose, in the SEAL teams, the we and the it, the structure and the teams were so well organized and so well supported. And the people who were attracted and trained to get on these teams and the institutions of the SEALs and the SEAL teams and the platoons all had just an incredible set of standards and rules that really kept you on track and did a lot of the work for you, if you know what I mean. I mean, you didn't really have to think about it, right? You just showed up and put out every day. Well, all of a sudden, when I got out of active duty and went and started my first business, it was like all of that went away and I had just a complete blank slate, right? I didn't really know my team, and I teamed up with my brothers-in-law who had a completely different set of values and a completely different vision for this business and a completely different moral compass, so to speak. And there was no structure because I had to create the structure because it was a business that didn't exist. So there were no rules. There was nothing. No it. It was blank. Initially, this was a very new experience for me, and so I kind of relied on my individual SEAL skills to really just kind of hammer this business to get it open. And that worked to some degree, but I really ignored the we space because I didn't really understand how important it was at that time, that how much the SEALs really aligned visions and mission and purpose and values in that we space, so that shared culture was like super powerful. So here I was starting a business with two partners who were my brothers-in-law. We didn't share the same vision. We didn't share the same values. We didn't share the same purpose, right? And I didn't do anything about it. And so the whole thing came kind of tumbling down after a couple of years because they were heading in a totally different direction than I was, and it wasn't good. And I really gloss over it in my book because I didn't want to put any negativity out there, but it was just a challenging time for me, but one that I really honor as being extremely growthful. Like, wow, did I learn a lot. It was like my emotional MBA, and I learned about the importance of that, taking care of the team and making sure that everyone's on the same sheet of music and shares the same vision, and then also that you do the work. And so during that time period, because I had left the SEALs, I was really focused on the business. I wasn't doing the work. What I mean by that, I wasn't doing my breathing and meditation training every day. I kind of got off track. I was still working out, but I wasn't working on myself.
I like that.
And that led me to make some decisions that I kind of regretted. So at any rate, yeah, nobody's perfect. I can, I understand the stuff. I teach it. I practice it every day. My decisions get better and better. My businesses are growing. I'm able to accomplish things that other people think are awesome, and they are. But I still make mistakes and stumble sometimes, and I've got to come back to the principles, and I got to, recommit to my training. And it's an upward spiral, right? You can't. There is no destination. It really is just a constant journey. And I outline what I call the 5 plateaus of awareness in my book, Unbeatable Mind. And, that kind of speaks to this journey, that as you go through these different plateaus, you kind of see the world through new eyes because you're at a higher, you got loftier viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
And yet you can still dip down to a lower plateau. Something can happen where all of a sudden, you find yourself acting out of a lower state, right, out of anger or maybe anxiety or something like that, or certain people that you deal with just kind of bring you back down to their level. I think we all know we've experienced that, but we've had difficulty putting words to it. But through training, through constant training, and the way I teach in both the way of the SEAL and Unbeatable Mind, we can then get our center of consciousness to take like a center of gravity, or to take hold in these higher stages. And the highest stage I call the integrated stage. And it's where we really get a new perspective on all the stages, and we take perspective on our perspectives. And then we get the skill to be able to dip down and deal with someone at earlier stages, like someone who might be acting out of emotional or anger stage, and we can meet them where they're at. We can understand them, but we don't have to get bullied by them, right? We don't have to get run over by them. We just can understand them, and we can try to get their needs met while we get our needs met, and ends up being a win-win scenario. So, wow, I kind of went off on a big tangent there. I completely forgot the initial question, but
no, you just been dropping so many knowledge bombs that it's amazing. So, but Mark, I want to thank you for, being vulnerable and sharing that with us, because I think it's important to equally learn from our failures, and then
agree.
Everyone from the Conqueror Nation can be assured that you are in fact human.
Totally agree. I think that when it comes to leadership, I'm sure most of your folks are leaders and want to be leaders and improve their leadership. Even the SEAL teams, we learned that, hey, it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to admit your mistakes and to know that you're not perfect, And so, like, after every mission, we would have, like, this very brutally honest meeting where, we'd go around and call out each other's bull and call out each other's mistakes. And so we could learn from it. It wasn't meant to be personal, right? And I think this is super valuable. And we do this now at SEALFIT. It's, like, really valuable to be called out, because how else are you going to know? A lot of times our mistakes are hidden from us, and we don't even know that we did something to hurt someone, or that something that we did had a second or third order effect that was bad or negative.
Yeah.
And how else would we learn if we don't open ourselves up to receiving feedback and also connecting with our heart? Our heart, our wisdom lies in our heart, and our creativity and our intelligence lies in our mind. We need both, right? And in fact, the word Kokoro, I have a program called Kokoro Camp, and Kokoro Camp is 50 hours of nonstop physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual training, structured off of the Navy SEAL Hell Week. And ultimately, though, the reason I chose that term because there's no English word that really does it justice, what I was trying to accomplish. And Kokoro, the term, means to merge your heart and your mind into your actions. Because when both are working together, you get wise results, as opposed to just clever results that might have a second or third order negative effect. Totally.
I couldn't agree more with you, Mark. So I want to respect your time, Mark. So we're about to jump into what I call the man up round. Yes, sir. But before we do, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. This week's giveaway comes to you from Trentley Butler. For $55 a month, for a limited time only, members receive a custom box of clothing worth as much as $150. To enter, check out the instructions on today's show notes over at conquermanhood.com/004. Mark, with all the accomplishments to date that you've had, what would you say is your proudest man moment?
My wife and I tried unsuccessfully for several years to have a child of our own, and finally, we just sat down and said, "Listen, why do we want to keep on, banging our head against that tree if it's not working? And maybe we can look at another path." And just opening myself up to this notion of being able to adopt a child and to be a father to that child, I think was an amazing experience. And we did go through the adoption process, and it was fraught with all sorts of emotional roller coasters. But my son Devin, we were at his birth, and he is 100,000% our son and my son. I couldn't imagine any other outcome. And if someone came to me and said, "Hey, Mark, I'll offer to rewind the clock and you can have your own biological child," and I'll be like, "Well, will it be Devin?" And of course, the answer is no. It couldn't be Devin. I said, "Forget it. That's no deal."
Wow, that's touching.
Yeah. So I think to me, that's very proud to be able to offer him the life that he has.
What type of process was that like?
Well, it was, we did a legal adoption, and it was in the United States. So we were lucky because we could pay, it cost us some money. It's not cheap, but it's not that expensive. I mean, it cost us like $25,000, which is a lot of money, but for most people. So it allowed us to kind of like work through an attorney who has a connection with adoptive or parents who want to put their kids up for adoption. And so that you get to have some little bit of selection. And we've heard such horror stories about people who, had unsuccess in adopting kids from foreign country like Russia or something. We didn't really want to go down that route. And also the route of going through the social services was interesting to us, but also, we just wanted to see if it would work this way first. And so that, we got hired, we hired an attorney, and she, went through her process, and literally within a month we got a call, and she said, you know what, Mark and Sandy, this wasn't what I was thinking, but something just came up, and there's this Hawaiian couple that the father is actually, Texan, but the mom is part Hawaiian and part Portuguese and part this and part that. But they had another set of parents lined up, but they backed out. And she goes, immediately thought of you. Like you guys popped in my head because I lived in Hawaii with Sandy, our first year of our marriage, and we loved the island. And so we're like, okay, well, we'll fly over and meet them and just check it out. And so we did. We flew over and meet the couple, and she was pregnant at the time. We just had a really good feeling about it. So we agreed to go through the process.
That's beautiful. Every time I see a family couple who goes that route, is just, I'm moved by it just because of, you have unconditional love for your children, but then you're,
Sure.
To have that heart of that person just makes me wish I was more like them. So thank you for sharing that. It's awesome.
You bet.
What advice would you give, Mark, to someone who has yet found their purpose?
I think that's probably most people. Most of the people who come through my training, they either figure they can't radar lock on it, or they never had a good sense of what it was, or maybe it's gotten confusing to them. And I have a few different ways that I approach it. And I think, people have to, it's an iterative process. It's not a quick thing. I can't give you a pill that's going to unlock your purpose for you. But finding silence, which we talked about earlier, is critical, right? So finding some practice that'll develop sacred silence within you, and it can be, long nature walks, but not practicing stillness in your mind on that walk instead of like making it a destination, like a Go Ruck challenge or something, and or sitting in silence, and or using any of the methods that we talked about, like the still water runs deep. So cultivating a silence practice so that you have the opportunity to kind of listen to your inner voice more, listen to the whisper of your soul, so to speak. That's one process. And the second one is you can use a visualization practice. And what I recommend, which works well for us, is visualize yourself meeting a future version of yourself, right? And so, like, you might visualize yourself in a mountain trail, and walking toward you is like an 80-year-old version of yourself. And just have some faith that there's more than meets the eye going on here. And so, when you do meet yourself, and you've got an image of what you look like and who you are, and then just ask yourself, the questions that we alluded to earlier in the podcast. Who am I? Why am I on this planet? What should I do about it? And you'd be surprised at what answers you get. You may not hear the answers, you may not see them vocalized, but you just get a sense that the answer is kind of coming through you. And then the third process I have, which is more structural and requires some contemplation and some journaling, is to actually sit and write your own obituary from the perspective of a good friend who knows your contribution to the world maybe even better than you do. And so this was inspired by the story of Alfred Nobel, who had a twin brother, and the twin brother passed away. And a reporter wrote an obituary, but he mistook the two. And so Alfred Nobel, opened up the paper one day, and there he was reading his own obituary.
Wow.
And of course, back then, when this happened, Alfred Nobel was best known for militarizing dynamite, right? For getting dynamite into the military system and making it useful for warfare. And so this writer who wrote the obituary on what he thought was Alfred Nobel's death basically alluded to how much carnage he had led the world into in World War I, right? And Alfred reading this was just appalled. He's like, "Oh my God," because he was a scientist, and he has his head down like a lot of nuclear scientists do about the awesome negative power of what they're creating, and he just couldn't believe that this would be how he would be remembered, and so he chose to change, and he created the Nobel Peace Prize, and he committed his life to peace, and he changed his story. And so if you could get a clear picture of how you should be remembered, right? When at the end, when money doesn't matter, when fame doesn't matter, when material wealth doesn't matter, what really matters is what impact did you have on the world, and how were you as a person? How were you as a person to your family and to your friends and to, your peers and even to your enemies? And what impact did you have in the world? And if you can answer those questions, like what impact did you have, it'll point to your purpose, right? How many people did you serve and how did you serve them, right? And when you get really down to it and you answer those questions, right, from your heart, right, they give you valuable information as to what you should be doing right now, right, to fulfill that.
Almost chills you to the bone to ask yourself these questions, and then,
Yes.
you have to be real with yourself, and you might be disappointed. But
Correct.
Like you said, you set yourself point at knowing yourself and seeking self-improvement then.
Right. No time like the present to get started, no matter your age, right? All you have is right now anyways, and so you might as well get busy.
Mark, most influential book you've read and why?
I've read so many amazing books, but one that keeps coming back to me is the quote I started with Napoleon Hill, the father of modern success psychology. And I just love his book, Think and Grow Rich, and I've read it 8 or 9 times. And it should be a starter book for anybody. It's not even just a starter book, but a book that should be read over and over and over again by anyone seriously interested in taking control of their life and making the most out of it.
Powerful book, Conqueror Nation. If it worked for Mark, it can work for you. So if you want to get his most influential book, you can get Napoleon Hill or one like it for free at audiobooks.com/conquer.
Yeah.
Mark, I forget whether this was in Unbeatable, I believe it's Unbeatable Mind, where you touch upon thinking offensively all the time to eradicate fear and indecisiveness. How does that work?
Well, in order to be offensive, first of all, the idea is that we're never reactionary. We're always one step ahead of our opponents, quote unquote, so to speak. That could be, the marketplace, our competitors, or, and of course, you're in the Marine Corps and I was in the SEALs. It could be our enemy. And we do that by being in control of our thoughts. So a lot of things we've talked about. So when you're in control of your thoughts, then you can set up the conditions so that you're always ahead of your opponents, right? You're always thinking one step ahead. And so you can set the stage for them to react to your things, to the things that you're doing. And then you understand what that reaction is going to do. And so that sets you up for the next action, which is going to cause another reaction. And the whole notion here is it's related to the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act loop, is for you to really tighten up your OODA loop so you can make decisions in real time extremely fast, and which then it disrupts the decision patterns of those people around you who are working against you, so to speak. And it causes them to either disrupt or to even sever their decision-making process, because they're just reacting so much to your actions that they can't keep up, or things flies off the wheel, so to speak. A gasket pops. It's something that needs to be practiced. We practice it in the way that we train, especially with our martial arts training, and we practice it with our mental training, and it really is just more of an orientation toward how you want to live your life.
I like that. I want to talk about a quick quote that you mentioned in the Way of the Seal, which really resonated with me, and that was, to live in an uncommon life, one needs to learn an uncommon discipline, I believe it is.
Right.
Can you share with us your morning or evening ritual that has led you to the life you live today?
Yeah, I think what's critical to live an extraordinary life, an uncommon life, is to live as if each day was potentially your last, or potentially the most important day that you have. And so in order to do that, we've got to set up the conditions for that day to be a rock star day, both in our planning, right? Maybe the night before or early in the morning, but also in the way we basically condition our mind and emotional state for that day. And so I have a morning process I call a morning ritual, where I go through a process of positivity, setting my mind and getting my mind and emotions really positive, feeding the courage wolf. And then I do some breath control, where I basically tune my physiology and get my mind clear, right? And then I do some yoga, which is going to tune my physiology even deeper and get my spinal system and my nervous system kind of into the game and ready for action. Right? And then I visualize myself going through the day, and I see myself, successful and winning and, safe, right? And accomplishing all the goals and tasks that I need to. And then as I kind of finish this whole process up, I recheck in with my ethos. I check in with my passion, my purpose, my principles, make sure I know what I stand for. And then when I look at my schedule, which is the last thing I do, I've got all that preparation. I can look at my schedule with fresh eyes and say, is everything that I've committed to today the right thing for me to do, right? Or is there something on here that is going to waste my time or take me off track? And what else can I do to move the dial toward fulfillment of my major one thing initiatives right now and toward my purpose? And what projects, do I need to really dive into to get me going forward? Or any conversations I need to have to unlock some energy or to unstick some stickiness or something like that. So I found that this practice, which can take only 5 minutes if I want it to, 5 to 10 minutes, is extraordinarily valuable. And, if I travel or do something when I miss it, I have to come back to it because, the day just doesn't quite go the way it could. And it's noted, you know what I mean?
Yeah, powerful stuff. All right, Mark, this is the last question in the man of round, but it's a question that I asked all my future conquerors, and that is, what is your definition of a conquering man?
Well, a conquering man is someone who's committed to mastering themselves so that they can serve others humbly, honorably. And in order to serve others, you really got to be in control and to be a good person yourself. And so, and that means you need to train. You need to develop yourself. You can't leave it to chance. You can't hope to be a good person. You got to take control of being a good person, and then you use that energy and that power for good things for your family, for your community, and for the world at large.
You have to take control because you can't just hope it. I love it.
That's right.
Mark, before we wrap things up, let us know how we can connect with you, and if you have any parting words, please hook us up because you are just a fountain.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah, this has been really, really enjoyable. I appreciate it. It's great to talk to you, and I'm available to help out any way I can. Your tribe. For people who want to learn more about us, like you mentioned, my books are a good place to start. Unbeatable Mind can be found at Amazon, and both audio book, ebook, or a print book. And then The Way of the Seal, same thing, Unbeatable Mind or Barnes & Noble. It's also in bookstores. And then online, sealfit.com, SEALFIT. That's our training business. Some terrific training. We do these immersive academies where everything we talked about in this call, we develop and we train alongside our physical training. And then if someone's interested in really taking a super deep dive on the principles in both books and what we talked about here, Unbeatable Mind online training is very cool. It's a 12-month program. Like I said, it does a deep dive into the 5 mountains of physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, spiritual development, as well as developing leadership, authentic leadership, integrated level leadership, and how to build elite teams. And it's an incredible program. We've had a few thousand people go through it, and the testimonies are very, very cool. So that's those are the main things. I'm also available to do speaking engagements here and there. I'm pretty selective with what I do there. Try to do like maybe one a month or 2 a month once in a while, but so that's a possibility, and we do some corporate training events. So there's a lot of ways to connect, and if anyone wants to contact me, the best way to do it is through my staff, info@sealfit.com, and just send a request, and I'll see it within 24 hours usually.
Awesome. Hey, Conqueror Nation, connect with Mark Divine on Twitter and Facebook, both at Mark Divine spelled out. Get his books, 8 Weeks to Seal Fit, Unbeatable Mind, and The Way of the Seal. And if you want to test what you're really made out, you want to go check out his Unbeatable Mind training for more details. Mark, thanks for coming on, brother. And I'll have to conclude here with a Semper Fidelis to you.
Semper Fi. And the SEALs say Semper Gumby, always flexible.
Always. Our feature conqueror today was Mark Devine, Navy SEAL entrepreneur and author of The Unbeatable Mind and The Way of the SEAL. There's a saying that's better to know one book intimately than to know 100 books superficially. In order to assess the true value and the advice of his work, I think it's necessary to make a commitment and not just to take them for the plans that you can conjure while you're reading it. So, take some time, develop the practices that he mentioned today on this session, and that's going to be a wrap for session 004. This week's giveaway comes to you from Trentley Butler. For $55 a month, for a limited time only, members receive a custom box of clothing worth as much as $150. Why shop when you can have a butler? To enter, check out the instructions on today's show notes over at conquerormanhood.com/004. From there, get access to everything Mark and I discussed today, links to his books, his resources, and of course, the Big 8 giveaway. Make sure and enter. Thank you for subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast. And I tell you what, Conqueror Nation, to you, I ask to conquer all.
Thank you for listening to Conquering Manhood. Now, it is time for you to conquer all. So take action. Head to conqueringmanhood.com and grab the 4 steps to conquering manhood, the ultimate guide, for free.